Believe it or not, these aren't the same car, just in a different colour. This is a Toyota and this is a Suzuki.
How is this possible, and how good are these plug-in hybrids? We're going to tell you in this review, but before that, don't forget you can click the link to go to whatcar.com and get a great deal on your next new car. And subscribe to the channel for lots more car reviews. Let's talk first about this plug-in hybrid version of the Toyota RAV4. Before this, you could only buy it as a standard hybrid, but now it gets a 2.5 litre 4-cylinder petrol engine and an electric motor, and together they drive the front wheels through a CVT gearbox.
At the rear, there's a second, smaller electric motor which drives these rear wheels and makes the car 4-wheel drive.
The petrol engine makes 182 brake horsepower and the front electric motor 180 brake horsepower. The rear motor at the back is 54 brake horsepower. So a total system output of 302 brake horsepower means this is a powerful car.
And it is properly quick.
More on that later. It also gets an 18.1 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery beneath the floor, and it can travel on pure electric power alone for up to 46 miles.
And that bit is probably more relevant to buyers looking at this type of car. And it also means that this RAV4 plug-in hybrid and the Across have one of the longer ranges among plug-in hybrids around today. Let's first take a look inside the RAV4 and remind ourselves what it offers in here. And generally, this is a pretty good interior. So the materials that are used, they've got a nice look and they've got a nice feel as well. And above all that, you've got really good build quality as well. So it all feels very well screwed together, got a real feeling of robustness in all the dials and the switchgear especially. But then if you take a step back and realise the money that you'd spend on a RAV4 plug-in hybrid or a Suzuki Across would also get you a plug-in hybrid Range Rover Evoque or a plug-in hybrid Land Rover Discovery Sport, then clearly those interiors are quite a few steps above what's on offer in here. But still, it's not a terrible interior, but for the money, there are better options available. You do though get a really good driving position here. You're sat nice and high with a really good view out the front and at the back. Plus on top of that, you get front and rear parking sensors and a reversing camera as standard. And adjustable lumbar support comes with every RAV4 and Across too. So you have a comfortable driving position with a great view of the road. But if there is one major weakness in this interior, it's the infotainment system. Now you get a 9-inch touchscreen with some small buttons either side of it, but the system itself, it's got quite a low res screen. The software is quite slow and not very sharp in its responses, and it just has quite a complicated layout. So the kindest thing you can say about it is that at least you get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard. In the back, space is pretty good in the RAV4, but you would hope that would be the case because this is quite a big car, but it does certainly deliver. I'm just under 6 foot. The driver's seat's in my driving position. You can see got a decent amount of legroom there. And headroom is also pretty good, even with this sunroof fitted on the top trim of the RAV4. It does cut into the space a little bit, but it doesn't feel cramped back here. And overall, it does feel quite open and spacious, but it's not quite as accommodating as the rear seats in a Kia Sorento. And also with the Sorento, you can get a 7-seat version of that car, but with the RAV4 and the Suzuki Across, they're 5-seat only. But overall, it's quite open and spacious, and one bit of luxury, as standard, you get heated rear seats.
So why are the RAV4 and the Across so similar? Well, Japanese manufacturers in Europe aren't having a great time right now. Emissions legislation over here means equipping expensive emissions-cutting technology to small cars, which have slim profit margins anyway. But a 2019 partnership between Toyota and Suzuki paved the way for model sharing. So now there's a Suzuki version of the Toyota Corolla Touring Sports, and there's this Suzuki version of the RAV4. This big low-emission PHEV helps keep CO2 emissions down in Suzuki's lineup, and it also saves them spending a fortune developing their own large SUV. In return for Toyota's help with big car production, Suzuki is building some small cars for them in India. So yes, the RAV4 and the Across are technically two different cars, but the actual differences are quite hard to notice.
The front ends are slightly different, and you'll find different badges on the steering wheels inside. Plus, while the RAV4 gets built-in sat-nav as standard, the Across doesn't get it at all. And they haven't even got rid of the map shortcut button on the infotainment system. So if you press it, it just says function not available. Although to be fair, if you've got your phone plugged in and you're using Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, then when you press the button, it will bring up Waze or Google Maps. So it's not totally useless. But apart from that, they really could have been separated at birth. And it also means they have identical boots. But the point to highlight here is that the RAV4 plug-in is slightly different from the RAV4 hybrid in terms of boot capacity. So in the hybrid RAV4 you get 580 litres, but that drops down to 490 litres with this plug-in hybrid model, with the bigger battery taking up room in the boot. But still, with this model, you can fit 8 carry-on size suitcases into the boot, which is a very good number indeed. You can see it is still massive, isn't it? Plus, there is some underfloor storage to keep the charging cables as well. Speaking of which, there is another difference between these two cars. If you want to charge the RAV4, then you'll need 2.5 hours to get a full charge from your 7 kilowatt home wall box charger. But the Across can only charge at half that speed, so you'll need more than 5 hours to fully replenish the battery. On the road, the RAV4 plug-in hybrid really is pretty quick. So it'll do 0 to 62 miles per hour in around 6 seconds, which is as quick as the Evoque and loads quicker than plenty of other plug-in hybrids like the Cougar and the Sorento. But this isn't the most rewarding car to drive quickly. So it's still a big, tall, heavy SUV. Yes, it's got a lot of power, but there's a lot of body lean and the steering is quite light. It doesn't feel particularly sharp at turn-in. And also it's actually quite easy to spin up the wheels with all that power that's on offer as well. So it is very surprising how quick this car is, because you just think it's some big Toyota SUV. Surely it won't be that performance focused, but in a straight line, it is quick. You just won't be that tempted to find its limits and really push on all that regularly. The ride isn't a strength of the car either. It's quite firm, so you thud over potholes and motorway expansion joints. It's not that it's uncomfortable, but the car never really feels like it settles down. The CVT gearbox, like every other CVT gearbox, is quite annoying really, because under hard acceleration it sends the revs soaring and it keeps them right up there basically until you lift. So the counter argument to that is, well, but it's fine around town, it's really quiet when you're not accelerating hard. And yeah, that's true. At low speeds around town, that is fine. But with a car like this that's actually got quite a lot of power and you might want to use that acceleration more often than you would in a slower car, then it is a shame that you have this kind of grating engine noise, because it's not a particularly nice engine note either. Now you've got some different drive modes to choose from. You've got Sport, Eco, Normal, but on top of that, you've got a few different electric modes you can choose from as well to decide how you want the car to use the battery. So what you've got is a nice simple auto mode where basically the car will be able to decide whether it's using electric power or fuel power or a combination of both. But you've also got a mode to force it to use electric power if it's got enough charge. And then if you hold that button down, a handy feature that it has, which quite a lot of other plug-in hybrids have now as well, is that you can put it in a charge mode. So if your battery's really low or if you just want to top it up, you can use the engine to recharge the battery and give you some more juice that way, which will give you more electric range later on in your journey. Now, obviously the point to make there is that's great to have, but it will have quite a big impact on your fuel economy as well, because it will get much worse. Now, what's really interesting is that on the road, the Suzuki Across is completely different to the RAV4. That was a joke. It's exactly the same. And the pricing is very similar between these two cars as well. And like most plug-in hybrids, they look pretty expensive on paper. And as a private buy, they're particularly tough sells, because you're looking at list prices around the £50,000 mark, which is pretty uncomfortable territory for Toyota and for Suzuki, because for that money, you can get a plug-in hybrid version of the Range Rover Evoque, the P300e. And for a lot less money, you can get the plug-in Ford Cougar, which is a really impressive plug-in hybrid SUV.
But for company car drivers, there is clear appeal. Because of its benefit-in-kind tax qualification, which it has thanks to its very low CO2 emissions and excellent electric range, it could be very cheap to run.
Not quite as cheap as you'd hope, judging by the spec sheet though, because the claimed fuel economy figure of 282.4 miles per gallon is going to be impossible to achieve over any journey that's longer than about 10 yards. So more likely, if you keep the battery topped up, you're sensible with how you use it on the road, then around 40, 50, maybe even 60 miles per gallon is more likely what you're going to record over a long trip. But because it's a plug-in hybrid, if you keep the battery topped up and you only do short journeys, then there's every chance that you'll be able to just use electric power alone, and then it will be really cheap to run. But again, the claimed WLTP electric range is on the optimistic side, just as it is with every other car. So expect more like 30 or 40 miles in real-world driving conditions.
The RAV4 plug-in is available in 3 different trim levels, but the Across has one take it or leave it trim, which is priced a little below the entry-level RAV4. The Suzuki is pretty much as well equipped. When you go up the trim levels in the RAV4, it's largely some styling tweaks that you're paying for. But the top trim does offer a head-up display, which isn't available at all in the Across.
So the RAV4 and the Across are 2 cars which together kind of need 2 separate judgments, because if you're buying in cash, then they're decent plug-in hybrids, but they're incredibly expensive. And for the kind of money that you're going to be spending on these cars, you could instead get a more polished plug-in hybrid rival like the Range Rover Evoque, the Land Rover Discovery Sport, or the Kia Sorento. But if you're looking to run these as a company car here in the UK, then that's where the appeal is, because thanks to their great range, they can be pretty cheap to run. They also offer impressive performance, and they're reasonably practical as well. If you want even more information on these cars, then go to whatcar.com, where you can also get a great saving on your next car, and tell us in the comments below which one would you rather have.